Let's talk a little bit about the finalists. So there are five finalists, and we had an opportunity, Will and I, to watch the films. And I think, I mean, I'd like for you to say more about it, but I think it was curious. I found it interesting that they're very different kinds of stories, very different kind of approaches. One is a sort of almost self-referential kind of the Brazilian film by Joyce Cursino. It's like, it's about somebody who's making a film. There's a film I also about a sort of very working class, like a taxi. She's on screen now. It was like Taxi Guard on a matatu in Kenya. There's a film about kind of relationships, the boundaries of relationships. Well, not film. Sorry, let me say web series. See, I'm an old guy. Kenya, I'm old. Web series.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I do it all the time.
And I really, and also there's Noma Wonga Kumalo's sort of more kind of, it's very more experimental, like in terms of the who the characters are, and it's almost like if you want gender bending, like the way that it was made. So I was curious in like how you pick them. What were you trying to achieve by picking these people? Because as I said, I was really struck by how different they are, how different these five films are in their approach, in their look, and their style.
Yeah, so we definitely wanted that kind of diversity of voices, diversity of approaches, genres, and we had a group of readers who basically selected which proposals we were going to accept. So us as the core team didn't actually choose these. To be honest, we were part of the discussions, but there were a group of readers who basically, and from all these countries, who selected these web series, and we had a final discussion where we can approve them or not. But the idea behind it was definitely to not do one kind of thing, and to also present web series as a format, something that could be anything. It didn't have to be what we generally think of web series as, which is comedy. And so we also just wanted to see what would happen. We didn't want to give too much direction in terms of where it should go. We had a theme which was Black liberatory futures, but we didn't actually. I don't think we really were sticklers about it. And we just really wanted people to be able to, the filmmakers to really do their thing. Like if there was really an idea that they really want to get off their chest, that was the idea we would want them to do. And I think you can see it in the way that everybody has their own voice, like there's a very definitive voice in every web series. So yes, we're very happy about that as well.
And I mean, is there any reason why, so it's 2 countries from Africa and 2 countries from Latin America. I'm curious to hear why those countries were picked. Maybe it was for practicality's sake. But in addition to that, do you think, I think as much as the films were diverse, I think sometimes you would notice that there would be sort of, I guess, recurring themes or I guess aesthetics, based on geography. So I thought some of the South African films, for example, had similar looks and feels applicable as well to the Latin American films. Is that something that just so happens to be the case with the 5 semi-finalists? Or from what you know, is that something that I think is much more observable across the board? And what do you think that says about the way film is approached based on different national contexts?
And can I just add to that? I also was struck by how the 2 South African films, for me perhaps, reflect the kind of, I suppose, like questions or where South Africa is now, like where young people in South Africa, were particularly women, like what women, sexuality, gender relationships. It's very much, the emergence of kind of new middle classes, and so the kind of worlds that they have to go through and so on. I thought that was black when I'm saying like black middle classes, and I think that was interesting in what the South African films in that way is very different, I suppose, from the other films.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the similarities that you're speaking about in terms of geography, and yeah, I think it does. Like Sean, I think what you're getting to is that there is some shared experience based on geography. In fact, one of the actors, which we didn't know till we saw the final, one is the actor who's in both South African productions, and I don't know if he knew or that it was the same.
I'm giving it a thought to pay to see if I can remember.
So, but yeah, there's definitely there's definitely differences in approaches based on geography. I think I wouldn't be able to comment really like on Latin American cinema at the moment in terms of what observations I could have there. But in terms of South Africa, I know that we're still developing a national cinema. We're still trying to develop our own voice, and I think it reflects that generally we don't really know who we are yet. Like we're still under the myth. We're still coming out of that myth of the Rainbow Nation, and so we're in a post-transition. I think our cinema now represents kind of post-transition cinema. But it's like, okay, we're not in transition anymore, but what are we now? And yeah, I think it's really interesting to watch what people are coming up with now, because we're also in a post-feast wall generation, and so a lot of these questions around intersectionality and those kind of things, you see it in South African cinema now, and I think that's also why the work by women is also interesting, and Black women particularly, because in South Africa, Black women weren't allowed to make films for a long time, and were not written into the history of South African cinema. So I think this is also why it's exciting now. And ideally, I shouldn't be the one, as a man talking about this. So I just want to point that out. But it's also important for men to lift up the work of Black women. So that's why I'm also doing this project. I tried not to be the face of it.
I know, yeah. We don't want to apologize to you, but we know that the one of the people is producing our program, and
yes.
the other person could not be available. So yeah, so it's just happened that you came on to represent the series, yeah. So it's not, Anyway, we're gonna dig
one thing I want to say, which is, while we're on this thread, one thing that I also found surprising, and I think this reveals the way I think you're socialized into expecting, or what your expectations are of cinema made by women are, is that, I came in before watching these films sort of expecting womanhood to be front and center in a very kind of obvious and explicit way. And I think that's how sort of it's stereotyped. And I think how probably if you are part of any marginalized group, you're kind of raised to tell your story in a very kind of obvious and explicit way. But I think after watching the films, I was actually quite surprised by how sort of subtle the themes are raised. That you could watch these films and you wouldn't necessarily think that there are submissions for a competition called Black Women Disrupt the Web. They could be made by men. They could be made by anyone. Is the one thing that I thought were interesting. So it's kind of, I mean, I don't know what that represents necessarily, but I think it also kind of suggests that we're moving past this idea that identity and representation has to be interpreted in a very kind of simplistic, one-dimensional and straightforward way, where you can make a film about being a woman where your experience of womanhood is complex. And I think that was something that I thought was shown by these films.
Yeah,
and also, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Sean.
No, go ahead.
To go back to Issa Rae's work again. That's something that she's spoken about a lot, which is about this idea of complexity. And that for her, it wasn't that Black women were underrepresented in television. It was that the types of representations were these very simplistic, stereotypical kind of representation at the time. This was the time of like Flavor of Love and shows like this. It was like a gap between after we had shows, more interesting shows like Girlfriends and things like that, when it became kind of like this very one-dimensional thing. So, yeah, so totally, your observations are like spot on there.
No, I think I have to move because this is the technical aspects of things. My computer might die. Sorry for that. But I just was going to say, I thought one of the things I really enjoyed about the Matatu film, I forgot the title of it now, by the young Kenyan director.
Yes, Demwada, the final title was. Yeah.
There was something about it that was sort of, there was a way in which it depicted as sort of like innocence about kind of falling in love, and also about kind of just like gestures that some of the characters would do when they were around each other. There was, I mean, these films are, there was some, yeah, some. Then there's another film, you know, which we don't want to give away too much, but there's also the film with the threesome, the couple in Joburg, which is completely the opposite. It's like the tone is a completely different kind of film. It's a much more Three's a Crowd. That's the title of the Is Three a Crowd. Is the title of that web series. I keep calling them films, but yeah, there's so much. I really enjoyed like this kind of the diversity between these different kinds of. Carolina Wambui is the director of the Kenyan film. Yeah, I really like just the really nice diversity of, and that they each hit kind of differently. They don't all hit at the same way. The South African, I think the Kumalo, right? Her film is much more. Sorry.
No more longer. Yeah.
Yeah, film is a little bit more, almost like more sort of like theater, like a kind of like a play, like actors in a play. Like this, you have to sort of like, you know, view it first like you're watching a play, and then you've got to like suspend that and just like if you at a play you do that, and then you kind of, you know, kind of just enjoy what you're watching. But there's a way in which he kind of tries to disrupt gender. Yeah,